Hi, everyone. Welcome to the College Fairs of Greater Denver Virtual College Fair. This is the highly selective colleges panel for this evening. So really excited to hear from great schools who are going to share, two great schools. But before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to note. My name is Catherine, and I will be your facilitator for this session. A few housekeeping items. First, your camera and microphone are off. You are muted and your video is off. The panelists can't see or hear you. If you have any questions at all, feel free to use the Q&A button towards the bottom of your screen to type in your questions to the presenters at any time. They are here, ready and available to answer your questions. This is one of many college presentations being offered, so feel free to check the schedule on the website for more. And lastly, all sessions are being recorded, including this one, and will be available at strivescan.com/greater-denver. Again, that's at strivescan.com/greater-denver. I'm really excited for us to get started, so I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with this session entitled Highly Selective Colleges.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation. We're so glad that you all are here. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about highly selective colleges. And just to kick it off, I would love to say a few words and introduce myself and introduce my colleague that is joining me tonight. My name is Corinne Smith. I'm a Senior Assistant Director of Admissions at Yale. I have been at Yale for 6 years now. This is my 4th year covering the state of Colorado. So if you apply, I am the person who would read your application. Prior to coming to Yale, I spent 2 years in the Northwestern admissions office. Love it there as well. Happy to talk about my experiences. At Yale, I serve as our QuestBridge coordinator. I also oversee all of our rural outreach and recruitment. So if you have any questions on those pieces, I'm happy to dive in there as well.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Mark Dudley. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the representative from Duke. I have had the great fortune of being the Colorado representative for a number of years now, but for this upcoming year, I unfortunately am not. I'm actually helping tonight on behalf of my colleague, Kaya Locklear, who's now our admissions representative for Colorado. But if you have any questions as Coloradans, you're welcome to contact me. You're welcome to contact Kaya or either one of us. And I've been in this position now for 6 years, and 6 years prior to that, I was a student at Duke in the graduate program. So I'm really glad to see and spend some time with all of you tonight.
Sounds like 6 is the magic number. And I think that gives us just enough experience to talk about and answer all the questions that you have around highly selective colleges. But to continue on, just to give you a sense of what we're going to do tonight, we are going to spend 10 minutes, really not that long, going through a few slides here on what it means to be highly selective, going through some of the nuts and bolts of holistic admissions and how we review applications, and then overviewing the deadlines and finding your fit in a few other pieces. With that, we're going to turn it off the PowerPoint. Our faces will get really big and really open it up to your questions. So this session is only going to be as good as the questions that you all submit. So with that in mind, please do feel free to send us anything you're wondering, large or small. We'll answer them on screen. We won't read your names out loud, but we'll definitely read the questions out. You can start submitting at any point. We're hoping to get through as many as humanly possible before the end of this session. So we are excited to see what you all have for us. And I know that we're both pros and can handle the difficult questions too. But with that, we want to start off by what does it exactly mean to be highly selective? Which schools fall into that category? And now a college is technically highly selective if it must say no to any student who applies on the basis of space. But there is a wide range of selectivity. So a school could be highly selective and have a 3% acceptance rate. It could be highly selective and have a 20% acceptance rate. It could be selective and still have a 50% acceptance rate. Both of our institutions are going to fall in that under 10% acceptance rate, which means that of all the applications we received, last year we received 47,000 applications to Yale, we're going to accept fewer than 10%. In our case, it's actually closer to 5%. And so that's really what we're focusing on tonight. Now, please know that there are 3,000 schools in the United States, and most of them are not highly selective or selective. Pretty much any student that wants to go to college can find a college where they will be accepted, regardless of their GPA or a number of other factors that might keep them out of these highly selective institutions. But you can see here that for the rest of this presentation, we're really going to focus on those schools with admit rates under 20%, and some of us, again, under 10%. Generally, schools with those types of acceptance rates are going to be, for the most part, private institutions. So there are definitely some incredible public institutions that are very, very highly selective, but both of our experiences are going to sort of reflect that private institution model and how we review applications at those types of schools. Now, I just wanted to throw up some examples of highly selective schools, and it might not be exactly what you think. We range all across the country, different sizes, different scopes, different locations, different focuses in how we learn and what we do. And these statistics are actually from 2 years ago. So I think that all of us experienced a pretty large increase in application numbers last year, making us even more selective than we had been previously. But just to get a sense, Duke, Yale, U Chicago, that's the crew that's presented on this panel for a few years now. And probably some schools that you might guess would have some of these lower admissions rates. Now, there are other schools on here that we absolutely love. We do a lot of work with Colorado College, with Caltech, and they also have very low acceptance rates. And similarly, schools like the Air Force Academy, while not everyone that you know or even yourself might be applying there, the number of students that apply that are very strongly interested, that would be good fits for those institutions and the space they have, limits those schools from taking a ton of kids. Deep Spring is one of my favorite schools in the country. They only have a class of about 15 to 20 students every year. So even though they don't have that many applications, it's still very, very selective. And same thing with schools that might have an art focus or conservatory, like Juilliard, as you can see on here. And these numbers truly are not to scare you. I think that that will be a recurring theme of tonight's session. While these are all very highly selective schools, we encourage students kind of putting their hat in the ring, taking a chance, submitting the application and seeing what happens if it's the right fit for them. But that said, if you like our institutions, there are absolutely 5, 10, 15, 20 others around the country that will hit some of the same things that you like as what we have, but might be a little bit less selective and might have a better shot of getting in at the end of the day. So just to talk a little bit about what we review when we look at these applications, because we are so selective, what is a school like ours looking for when we're admitting someone? Because there's definitely more than 2,000 qualified applicants to a place like Yale. There's definitely more than 2,000 students that we want to admit each year who would be awesome, amazing, and successful at our institution. Well, generally, we're looking at a few different buckets that all are important in the process. And I would almost say equally important in the process. So a student could be the best ever or the most interesting at one of these, but if they're not strong in the other areas as well, then they're probably not going to be the best fit for our communities. And so when we review an application, the very first thing that we're looking at is the student's information, generally, their background and their context. Where are they from? What is their neighborhood like? What is their school like? What opportunities did they have? And did they take advantage of those opportunities? So we know that schools are very different. Opportunities, neighborhoods, organizations, very different. We're not looking for you to do something because a friend or cousin across the country was able to do it in their school. If it's not available to you, we don't expect you to have done it. But what we are looking for is that you took advantage of what you have. So that's the first thing. We're looking at what was there. When we look at that, we're also seeing, all right, in academics, what was your kind of academic story? And that begins with your transcript. What classes did you take? How did you do in those classes? Did you continue challenging yourself for all 4 years? Might you have had a little bit of a rocky start to freshman year, which happens a lot, but it kind of leveled out sophomore year and kept challenging yourself and doing really well. Things like GPA, class rank, type of curriculum, APs or IBs or dual enrollment, those all fall into academics. If a student chooses to submit testing, at least we're test optional this year. I think, Mark, you guys are as well over there. Yeah. So for students applying this year, if a student submits testing, we'll look at it. If they don't, that's perfectly okay. It's not going to be held against them. The next kind of bucket is these extracurricular activities. Again, what were you involved in? What did your school have? And what did you join? Did you get involved for all 4 years? Is it something you found a excitement or a passion for 2 years in and really dove in? Did you take on any sort of leadership role? That's questions that we're asking ourselves. We're looking at letters of recommendation, which truly my best advice is just to pick someone who likes you and knows you well and can write on your behalf, and it will all be fine. Essays. By the time you get to senior year, a lot of this is out of your control. So when you want to kind of take back some of that control and reduce the stress, the best place is to really focus on those essays, because it's the piece that you still have to be able to work on and craft and give to us at the end of the day. And some schools will offer and consider interviews. That really depends on the institution, but it could be a part of the evaluation.
So when it comes to whether you're looking at these schools, they're part of the list of colleges or universities that you might apply to, there's a lot of process to it. In order to apply, there's going to be some terminology, some dates and deadlines, and things that are often brand new to you, because for most students, they're typically applying to college only during one cycle. So we just want to walk through some of the information here, just to step back a little bit. Every college is possibly going to be doing things just a little bit different. So if you find the way that one university does it, it may or may not be the way that another university does it. So take the time that you have right now. It is September. For all of you, there is still plenty of time. When you're looking at the colleges and universities on your list, get a sense of some of these dates, deadlines, requirements, and procedural differences, and have that be part of your research. So as you are winnowing down to schools, when you actually get to that application phase, you're going to be pretty well versed about what school one requires, what school two, etc. But what you might see when it comes to how you're going to be applying, there's a lot of different things. There are a number of group applications, and by group, I mean that you can actually use one application to apply to many colleges and universities. And the one that you might have heard of, the most common one, is the common application, and it's something like 700 or 800 different colleges and universities. That is their application. You're going to find there are many others: coalition application, universal college, state applications. If you're applying to multiple campuses of the state university system, there's often one application. And for some candidates, there's also the Quest Bridge program, which if any of you may or may not have talked about with your school counselor, that's another application program as well. So these are typically supplemented with school-specific sections there. So you submit one general application. There might be some school essays or prompts, or one school might require a different number of letters of recommendation or whatever that might be. But these are going to be those group applications. You're also going to find that for some schools, there might be a school-specific. So they still use an application that is unique to their school. That application can only be applied to that single school in mind. So again, this is something, don't really worry about too much out of the gate. Find the schools on your list. And then when it comes down to how you're going to be applying, you're going to find that there's different applications, and you're going to have a good idea of what those exactly are. Now, with a number of different application methods, you're going to find that there's even more of these notification plans or deadlines. So as a general sort of biggest frame here, you're going to find that there's either rolling admissions or specific date plans. So rolling admissions means that applications can come in at any time, and the admissions offices are going to be evaluating those applications as they receive them, and then releasing those decisions as soon as they're ready to. So they roll in and then they'll roll out. And some schools might run out of spaces. So in a case, if you're looking at a rolling institution that might be a little bit more competitive there, it is actually possible that the university or college will run out of available spaces in the class. So there can be that incentive to apply early. Now, many colleges, in fact, the vast majority of highly selective institutions are going to have set decision plans. That means that if you apply early, it doesn't matter what that deadline is. That's when the admissions office is going to read those applications, and they're not going to be releasing decisions beyond, that actual set release date. Now, generally speaking, there's a lot of these different plans. We can sort of look at the big categories as being early, regular, and possibly transfer. So early plans essentially mean that you're applying early. You typically find out that admissions decision early as well. For many of these, there might be a binding commitment. So if you actually apply and you're admitted, you are bound to attend, but not all of them. So as you're doing your research on your colleges and universities, get a sense of what those early plans are and ask the admissions offices straight out, just to, help me understand what exactly am I looking at here if I look at that early decision plan or early action plan. And you're going to find that there's early decision 1, early decision 2. The number of these have grown greatly in the past few years. But again, start with your college list, and then once you've narrowed it down, get a sense of how you can apply and when you can apply. Regular decision is typically the primary way that the vast majority of students across the country apply to highly selective institutions. That is a big pool. Students, you have typically an early or January or winter deadline, and you'll find out typically by early April with a month to decide if you want to attend. And then for many candidates who might have started college elsewhere, you can look at a transfer admissions process. But again, just to reiterate, start with your college list and then get a sense of what application plans are available and which one works best for you. Next slide. Okay, so what is actually going to be contained on the application? Well, they're all going to be a little bit different there. But as Corinne mentioned earlier, with some of the things that we're looking for, this is how you impart that information to us. And what I want to share in that is that we only know what we're told. So if there's information you would like for us to know, make sure it's in the application. And you're going to find that there's a lot of sections of the application that hopefully provide you the opportunity to impart the information to us that you would like to have us evaluate. You're going to be asked for some personal information about you, your academic background, your history and your academics, but also what are some of the academic plans that you would like to take on. Extracurricular section, resume, whatever it might be, there's going to be a number of different sets for that. And then essays, there's going to be several different essays. I'm going to let you just sort of read there. And for many of you who have started your application, you're probably getting familiar with those. Now is about the time to work on them. One that I do want to highlight is actually that middle one, the COVID or community disruption statement. This is something that has only been in existence for 2 years now. And this is for any student, for schools and applications that have these as an option, just to let us know how COVID has affected you, or if there's been other community disruptions or natural disasters. These greatly affect your daily life. These greatly affect your academic setting and what you have on your plate and what you have available in your day to do. So provide some information if you feel comfortable about what's going on, because above all else, none of our institutions want to essentially punish or penalize you because of obligations, responsibilities, or different things that are on your plate that other students might not have. So as I mentioned earlier, we only know what we're told. So if you do have that extra context or specific information that you would like us to share, technology limitations, disruptions at home, disruptions in your community, really long commutes every day, any or all of the above, you should absolutely feel like you can impart that to us, because we want to understand your context before we even begin to evaluate a single part of your application. And then you're going to find some other sort of legal language about if you apply to a binding early decision program, you're typically going to be signing a commitment form with your parent or guardian and also with your school as well. But if any of these things, with any or with all of them, if you have any specific questions, talk to your school counselors. But admissions offices are typically available Monday to Friday during business hours. So pick up the phone or send us an email. We want to help guide you through this process. Okay. And when it comes down to making that decision, right before we jump into the Q&A here, the important thing to say is, make the decision for you. Don't make it for, what a magazine might list. When it comes down to it, some students will talk about how they apply to many, if not all, of the highly selective institutions. We are very different when it comes down to the setting, the academic side, the academic experience, what opportunities are available. They're all very different here. So we are just part of the landscape of higher education, as Corinne mentioned here. So we hope that if you do have highly selective institutions on your list, that it's not too many of them, but that this is just part of your list. Because the reality is that, especially now, highly selective institutions are highly selective for every single candidate. With both of our institutions this past year having an acceptance rate under 5%, the unfortunate reality is that the overwhelming vast majority of candidates we unfortunately cannot accept. So make us one part of the application landscape for you, if it's a part at all. But when you're thinking about, broadly, what type of institutions, colleges, and universities should I be interested in, look at the focus of instruction. Is it a large research university? Does it delve deeply into research, or is it more teaching focused into liberal arts? Is it blended between the two? You're going to find that a lot of schools might have a liberal arts core in a research university, which is what Duke does, and I understand Yale to do it as well. You might find some art, design institutions, technical or trade. There's also community college, there's HBCU and tribal institutions, women's specific colleges, religious, military, private. There's a lot of factors there. So as you're doing your research, get a sense of what type of fit is what you're going for there. I guess sort of think of the three bears, finding the porridge that's the right temperature, or the beds that's the right level of comfort there, because these are all very different things. And as students in Colorado, the great news is that you have all of these institutions within your state border. So you don't have to travel virtually or in person thousands of miles to get a sense of this. In Colorado, you have large public universities, you have small private universities, and everything in between. So start local, get a sense of what type of institution looks good and feels right to you, and then broaden that search out if you're interested in maybe going out of state or going to different colleges as well. Where the college is located has a big effect on your college experience, how big it is, what are some of the other policies? Look at financial aid and financial support. Speaking about highly selective institutions, we understand that very often highly selective institutions are going to have the highest sticker price. And that can very quickly, turn families and students away from our institutions because they think that this might not work for them. But for most, if not, nearly all of the highly selective institutions there, we actually find that, a sizable portion of the student body, in many cases, a majority of the student body, are attending our institutions for less money than it might take to attend a state institution. So use the calculator tool, use the financial support offices that are available to you, understand need-based scholarship opportunities and merit-based scholarship opportunities, because above all else, we don't want a student or a family to not consider our institution just by looking at that financial information and that cost of attendance if the student would be a great fit for our institution. And make sure you have a balance here. When you're looking at, as I mentioned earlier, have some reach institutions such as our, if we might be on your list there, but make sure you have targets and likely at schools as well. And these are things that you can talk to your school counselors about. So that's just a lot of information thrown there. I think we're ready to turn it over to you now. So we see some Q&A are coming in. We want to make sure to go through those as much as we can in the next 22 or so minutes.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And hopefully that's helpful for you all. I think that each of us, we know how important financial aid is, especially, and I think that that was a perfect note to wrap the presentation on. So we can both drop links in the chat to our financial aid offices where you can use actually kind of quick cost estimators to see what it might cost you to attend our institutions. One fact that I'll just throw out here, and then we'll dive into this Q&A, that I just think is really interesting. For students that are coming to our institutions, private institutions, highly selective ones with great financial aid like we both have, the actual average loan debt for a student graduating from Yale, first of all, 86% of our students will graduate with no loans at all. The 14% of students that do graduate with loans, the average loan debt is $14,000 total over 4 years. In comparison, the average loan debt from a public state institution is generally between $30,000 to $35,000 over 4 years. And I know that Duke is very similar to Yale in these numbers. And so what we're saying there is really, we know that that sticker price, the cost of attendance, can seem really high, but it's not the reality of what our students are spending to attend our institutions. So we'll definitely, I'll go ahead and drop that link for Yale right in there. And I'm sure Mark will do the same. I think that we've gotten a couple of great questions coming in. They're sort of dividing into two categories, some of the technical and then some of our own as experienced admissions officers and the applications that we read. So I'm thinking that we can knock out some of these technical ones first. Mark, do you want to take a couple of these questions on the ACT and SAT? How much emphasis is placed? Do we really not care if students submit them? How about that?
Absolutely, and I'll send some questions your way too. But this is a great question. I think that especially now, the reality of COVID, I think, has kicked college admissions offices into high gear on this question and maybe accelerated our decisions and sort of front loaded them. So many institutions now are test optional. Both Yale and Duke are. We were this past year, we are this upcoming year, and many institutions have said that they will permanently be test optional. We haven't yet, but we are considering it. So the question is, are you really test optional? What does this mean here? Yes, we truly are. We had about half roughly of the students who applied to Duke applied with testing without. And when it comes down to, and I'm sure Yale, many others will say similar things here, and our admitted students look, about proportionate to that. But when it comes down to it, the decision is yours to make. And within that, we don't make assumptions or expectations. So if you didn't apply, or if you did not submit standardized testing when you applied, we don't say, well, why didn't the student do that? Maybe it was a low score. That's not anything we talk about there. We say, well, the student didn't apply with standardized testing. Let's look at everything else. And if you did, we also understand that for some students, they might not have been able to take it a second or a third time where they might have been able to earlier. So there's a lot of different wrinkles and layers to it there. So we are truly test optional. My best recommendation is if you have the opportunity to take it and you feel like it is a strength to your application, if you feel like it sort of enhances and backs up everything that we know about you from the application itself, you're welcome to self-report that or send that in. But if you feel like it didn't exactly capture what you sort of feel about your academic preparation and how you feel about your overall application there, you should feel like you don't have to submit it, and it shouldn't hopefully be a struggle that you have. Now, not every institution is test optional. Many institutions still do require testing. For some institutions that are test optional, they may require them for scholarship applications or some other things there. So as you are best able to do your homework and reach out and contact offices. But if you see test optional there, it's truly test optional. The decision is 100% yours to make, and not submitting standardized testing will have no detrimental effect on your chances of admission.
Thanks, Mark. And I love presenting with you because it's almost always the exact same answer for Duke and Yale. So it aligns perfectly with anything I would have said. I think I'm going to take the next question. We've gotten a few coming in actually about curriculum and course choice, and if a school offers AP and IB courses or AP and dual enrollment courses, do we have a preference and how does that work? So first of all, generally schools will have AP or IB or dual enrollment or honors or none of these things. You might have never heard of any of those, and that's fine. We again are not comparing schools to each other. We're not comparing curriculums to each other. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of different curriculums that exist around the world, and we've read a lot of them, and I don't think we'll ever have each read all of them because there's just too many. But the way that it works is that we are looking at our highly selective institutions for the strongest applicants who will have generally taken the most rigorous courses available to them. So if that means if your school has AP options, we're going to expect students to have taken some of them, maybe not all of them. I know that I am terrible at math. I actually failed my first semester calculus finals senior year. I got 46%, woohoo. But I did all my homework, so I did okay in the class. But that was never my strong suit. I always kind of took one level lower in math, and I really sort of pushed myself, challenged myself, took those APs in the other areas. History and English in particular were what I loved, and that's where I kind of had a bunch of those higher level classes. So this is not me saying you have to take all of them, but if your school offers 20 APs, we're probably going to look for you to have taken more than 2 or 3 of them if you're going to be a very strong candidate at our institutions. Now, if a school offers AP and IB or AP and dual enrollment, it's really going to be whatever your school considers the most rigorous option available. I will add a caveat though. When a school does offer those APs and those dual enrollment courses, at least at Yale, we're really looking for students to maximize the options available to them in their own school with their peers, with their teachers in high school that know how to teach high school students, know how to write letters of recommendation to us. So if you have those options available to you, I would pursue them before going towards dual enrollment. But there's not going to be a curriculum that gets a student into our schools or keeps a student out of our schools. And there's not going to be a curriculum where we would ever say, go change schools and take that option at this other institution or high school in your area. So I would connect with your high school counselor and say, hey, students applying to this type of school, what type of curriculum have they taken? What is our high school considered to be the most rigorous option available?
Okay, great. Yeah. So just looking at some of the next questions, I'll just jump on one here. And question is about how do we show interest in a school that may be out of state, especially if we're not going to be doing some in-person visits this year? And this is a great question. So I think there's a lot of layers to it, as there are with many things. So we, above all else, would like students to do research into institutions for your own sake. So when you're figuring out, maybe I'd be interested in going to Yale or Duke or any other institution there, doing some of the opportunities to engage with us, such as attending a virtual session or contacting the admissions office, or even just reading through the website, should be for your benefit above all else, to get a sense of, is this a place that I think I would actually like to submit an application? So do this mainly as a research thing. Colleges don't, have a single way of doing things. Some institutions will actually expect that a student will engage. It's this thing called demonstrated interest. And colleges have a lot of ways of assessing that. They can see, are you opening and reading the emails that they send? Have you attended a session, either virtual or in person, or any of these other things? Are you on the mailing list there? So some universities are going to be explicit and say, we do track demonstrated interest. And many other institutions are going to say the opposite, that, we're not tracking demonstrated interest. So we're not tracking demonstrated interest there. We assume that if you apply, you're interested. So hopefully students are engaging with us just for their own sake, for their own learning. And the ways to do that there are through those sessions that are available. Both Yale and Duke and many other colleges, we're doing a lot of these sessions, every single week, 4, 5, 6 days a week here. So just go to the admissions website, sign up for some sessions there, but only if you really have the time and the opportunity, because we understand that now, above all other times, staring at a screen all day is not good for student mental health and wellness. So if you're truly tapped out and you just don't have the bandwidth or the opportunity, or you just don't have a way to connect with us there, that's also perfectly fine. So engage with us in the ways that you can. Contact a representative, contact the office generally, do some homework, sign up for the mailing list, attend a session if you're able to. But for every school, again, it's going to be a little bit different there. So as you do narrow down on your college list, maybe look specifically to see if demonstrated interest is something that they're tracking. And if it is, maybe sort of be more deliberate about these things. But if not, use the information through the sessions, through the website, through emails, to whatever way you see best.
I think Mark hit the nail on the head there. And just to be a little more explicit, there is a question that we received a little bit later, possibly while Mark was answering this one, that as the recruiters for this area, would we meet with students who are interested, or is that something we want to do? I don't have the bandwidth. I do these programs usually 3 or 4 nights a week at this point. So a lot of you might see my faces. You could always kind of meet me on your end, but I don't do any interviews with students and applicants. I don't meet in person with any students in that way. We have great sessions all the time where students can go and get their questions answered. We also have a website where students can submit those questions and they'll be answered by our current student employees or admissions officers in the office. If a student had a question specific to their high school or circumstance that was important, that's something they could submit and it would get forwarded to me as their area admissions officer. But that kind of thing, as Mark mentioned, we don't track demonstrated interest. So having that contact is not going to help an applicant get into our institution. So just something to keep in mind. Because that was a build off of one, I guess I will answer another. I'll actually take my favorite question. Is there a preference if a student applies early decision as opposed to regular admission? We might have a little bit different answers to this question, so I'll go first and then see if Mark has anything to add. At Yale, we are actually an early action school. I know there's so many different iterations of this, but restrictive early action is where we fall. And most of my Ivy League peers are going to be the same. What that means is that you can apply to us early, but you cannot apply to another private institution early. So you cannot apply to Yale, Duke, U Chicago, Stanford, Harvard, all early. For us, you have to pick one, but we're early action, not early decision, so we're not binding. A student that gets an early can go on and apply to as many private schools in a regular decision round if they want. They have all the way to May 1st to tell us if they're coming. A student at any time can apply to public institutions. A lot of them do have earlier deadlines for scholarships and things like that. Now, in our process at Yale, we use the exact same criteria to evaluate early applicants and regular applicants. There's no bonus points or check marks or anything like that for being in our early round. We would never admit someone early that we didn't know we would be really excited about if we saw their application regular. However, we do tend to get a smaller pool of students who self-select themselves as good fits for Yale and have very strong why Yale answers and motivation for being there that gets us excited. The pool in early is generally somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 applicants, whereas the pool in regular has been anywhere from 30,000 to 40,000 applicants. So it's just kind of that sheer size that kind of messes with the acceptance rates over here.
And I can supplement for Duke. So we at Duke use early decision, which is a binding program. And then of course we have regular decision. So with early decision, a candidate is saying, if I'm admitted, I will enroll. We always want families to use the net price calculator tools before making this decision, because we don't want a student to find out in December, if they're admitted early decision, that financially it will not work for their family. So please use the net price calculator tools and contact our offices if you would like to have a specific conversation about your family situation. For us, I will say that there is an advantage to applying early decision. A lot of it is because of the pool. We do fill roughly half of our class early, and we have a significantly smaller applicant pool in that early decision round. But it's also a part of us basically repaying the trust that you're placing in us. I mean, if you apply early decision to a binding program such as Duke, you're saying, this is my college, this is the place, above all, every other institution in the world, if I'm admitted, I'm going. And that's a big thing to do at 17 years old. So if you're willing and ready to say, I've done my research, I've done my homework, this is my one college, I'm applying early decision, we do want to give a little bit of reward there. Now, every college is going to do things a little bit differently. That's sort of, I think, the main takeaway answer here is that every college will do things a little bit differently. And then, in fact, just speaking on behalf of another institution, Georgetown University, I actually know has a lower acceptance rate for their early program than they do for their regular program. So every school is always a little bit different there. It can absolutely be confusing, and signing contracts can be pretty scary. So if you have any questions at all, and you should feel free to share this information with us. I mean, if you even want to call the office and say, I'm just a little confused here. Can I apply to the University of Colorado and to Duke early decision? We will answer that question for you, and we're not going to jot down that information there. We above all else want to make sure that you have the right information that you need to make these decisions. In fact, all of us are hoping that students are applying elsewhere, because admission to any of our colleges is not a guarantee. So if you have that simple question of, I don't understand, can I apply to your school under this program and another school under this specific program? Call us and let us know. Above all else, we want to be here, we want to be accessible, and we want to be helpful, because this is definitely one of the most confusing parts of the process. Building on that, a question I see here is in specific regards to the financial aid policies of an institution and how they go about that. Again, it's really going to depend school to school there. Some schools are going to use just purely need-based money, and need-based money is typically a grant or a combination of grants and loans that are given to the student, just given the family's financial situation. Some schools might have some merit scholarships that might have different selection criteria or different applications there. But I think the heart of the question there, when it comes down to it, specific for your family situation, are we here to help? Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. Use the tools that are available, net price calculator tools. Colleges and universities are required by law to have those on their websites. So use the net price calculator tool. My Intuition, some other similar calculator tools are very helpful there. These are a starting point. These are going to work well for a majority of families and applicants, typically that have a stable income structure and not a lot of family change. That's not the case for a lot of families. If you've had a job change, or you've had another kid go off to college, there's a lot of things that are going to change that picture there. So these are going to work well if things are relatively stable and fixed for a family. But if not, use that as a starting point. Call the office, contact us, have that in-depth conversation, get a good sense of what your family situation is going to be, because every college is going to do it differently. There's going to be a lot of unfamiliar terms and terminology there. So we want to be helpful to you throughout the admissions process. Our financial aid services offices want to be helpful to you in the same way as you consider applying to our institutions.
Definitely. And I think that both of our schools will have financial aid offices as well. that are happy to talk with you, take your calls. They have office hours. I know that we have Zoom appointments as well for prospective applicants. And well, I know a good amount actually at this point about financial aid. I'm never going to be able to dive into a family's tax returns and tell you what it would cost you. So financially, it's probably the best place to start there. And some of the most complicated situations come up a lot, but have to do with family members who might be in sales, or a family who might own a business like a restaurant where income changes from month to month, year to year. COVID could have had an impact. Farms are really complex situations. So there's many reasons why these wouldn't be perfectly accurate, but you can definitely get on a call or on a Zoom with a financial aid officer. We are seeing a lot of questions come in about extracurricular activities. So I think that we might take a gander over there in that direction. And kind of the theme that I'm seeing is two things. So maybe I'll take the first and Mark, you can take the second. So how important it is to diversify extracurriculars and be well-rounded. And then do extracurriculars kind of help boost or make up for kind of a lower academic piece potentially to these highly selective colleges. So I'll start with that diversifying activities piece. The real secret to college admissions is that we are admitting a well-rounded class, but each individual student doesn't necessarily have to be well-rounded. We need to fill hundreds of student organizations. We need everyone from the swim captain to the person on debate to the person performing in the all cello band. But we don't expect for one individual to be the swim captain and competing on debate and be a highly accomplished cello player. And so some students just love doing a lot of different things. They're kind of that well-rounded student, and that's great. But we also see a lot of applicants who are more spiky, if you will, who have a couple of very serious interests. Maybe that's robotics and 3D printing, and that's where they spend their time, and that's great. Most applicants, whether they are well-rounded or spiky, are generally going to have 2 or 3 things that they care about a lot. That's where they're going to spend the majority of their time. That's where maybe they've taken on some sort of leadership role, but that's not going to necessarily be all 6 or 8 or 20 different things that they're involved in, right? And so we don't have a preference as to what a student gets involved in. I've read amazing applications from someone in the juggling club, which is something my high school didn't have and I would never be able to do. And I'm just as intrigued by that as I am by the student who does underwater photography or who does something like cheerleading that every high school pretty much has, right? So it's really up to you what gets you, or for the parents on here, your student, your child excited. I wouldn't force any of those things because what we are looking for is a student who's going to want to come to our campuses and be just as engaged and excited to do things there.
And also to answer that second half, I think this may be coming up to our program end time here, but the question was, can strength and extracurriculars make up for maybe softer or other parts of your application? It's a limited yes answer here. So it is absolutely the case that as part of holistic admissions review, if a candidate might have a softer assessment in any area of our review process there, we will look to see that strength is made up elsewhere. So if, you know, a student has a little couple of bumps on the academic transcript, but they have really deep committed involvements in their extracurriculars, you know, that can certainly help balance it out there. There is a limit though. You know, we always, above all else, want to make sure that every candidate is going to be an academic match for the institution that we have. Duke and Yale and many other institutions are very rigorous academically. We want to make sure that we are bringing students to our campuses who are going to be academically successful and thrive in and out of the classroom there. So we want to make sure that strength is evident and it can be demonstrated in all the ways we mentioned there earlier. If extracurriculars are especially strong and you might have had a bump or two in the transcript there, can it make up for it? Sure, but it's all part of the holistic review, and it's impossible just to talk about one tiny little piece without talking about the whole puzzle and the whole process. And I will quickly wrap up and say that when you are looking at extracurricular sections, again, let us know that contextual information. If you have relatives living with you and you're their caregiver, let us know. And I know that doesn't necessarily seem like a club or an activity, this is a commitment. This is something you're dedicating a lot of yourself to, your time, your energy, and your focus there. That long commute, that part-time job, those other things that you may not think automatically is that extracurricular section should be on that section. Provide us that contextual information. We don't want to penalize you because you have different obligations and responsibilities than some other students.
I know that Catherine's on here to tell us to wrap up. I just want to emphasize, just as Mark did with the parents and family circumstances and things like that, we also love students who have jobs. That's something that our committee always takes note of, always gets excited about. Students who understand the value of work, understand the value of earning their own money. It's not a requirement to get into our institutions, but it is something that absolutely counts as an extracurricular activity, often a large time commitment that a student should be putting on their extracurricular list, and that does get us pretty excited in most scenarios.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So much great information. And I can't think of a better way to end. So we really appreciate both Yale representatives from Yale and Duke here. Again, so much great information, some great questions coming in through the Q&A. So again, feel free to reach out directly, and I'm sure Corinne and Mark here can definitely assist you and direct you where needed. So again, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And thank you to each of you for joining us. We have now reached the conclusion of this session. As we close, there'll be a very quick 5-question survey that will appear on your browser. If you don't mind taking a moment to fill that out for us, your feedback is extremely helpful. Again, this is one of many college presentations being offered, more sessions happening, so feel free to check the schedule on the website for more. And lastly, this session is being recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/greater Denver. Again, thank you all and have a great night.